Catching carp can be mega easy, and in this video I'm going to show you how to do it. The fish we're targeting today at Kiveton are your standard commercial size fish, so anything from 5 to say 15 pound. Oh, that's the biggest of the day, that. And pellets are the bait to fish from. Whack, that's what you're after. I'm going to run through everything you need to know: where to fish, plumbing up, rigs and hooks, and most importantly, the feeding. Usually when I'm fishing with hard pellets, I like to fish this out into the open water. So take today for example, I've got a nice open water swim and I've found a nice flat spot at around 14 metres. That's a great starting point because the fish are naturally going to be out in the main body of the lake at the start of the session. That's a great place to kick off. I'm going to start off with a 6mm in the band and I'm going to feed 4mm in my little pole pot. Now today we've picked a peg where the wind's off us back. Always try and do that if you're on a pleasure session because it's a lot easier to fish this bait. But if you're in a match in certain situations, I always like to feed with a pole pot if the wind's like this because you can't be that accurate. So the reason why I've chosen a 6mm in the band as well is because that's a great hook bait for these size fish, 5 to 10 pound carp. But I don't know what the fishing's going to be like. So that's why I'm feeding with 4mm in my little pot. If the fishing's a lot better than I think, then I'll feed what I'm fishing on the hook, which is 6mm, because I think that's a little bit more positive. But I'm going to start the session off with 4mm, and I don't know if you saw that then, I just dunked my little pole pot. I'm fishing with a medium pole pot today. I dunked it in the water before I shipped out. That just stops the pellets from rattling out when you're shipping out. So I'm going to get to my 14 metre mark here. And I've got a far bank marker, which is the peg to my left. Always have a far bank marker, gives you something to fish to, keeps you nice and accurate with your feeding. And I'm literally going to turn my pole pot over, and about a foot off the surface of the water, I'm just going to rattle them pellets in. Make that noise. Then literally a little tipper tapper of the pellets hitting the water, it'll just get the carp's attention. And if the wind doesn't get any stronger, I'll then pick up my catapult and I'll feed a few pellets that way. But I'm going to start my session. So carp just topped about 6 metres away from where my pole float is. That's a really good sign. But just be careful to be nice and accurate to start with. Don't loose feed bait everywhere. And with the wind the way it is now, like literally right now where it's flat, that's a good opportunity to pick up my catapult and I'll feed a few. But I don't want to feed too many pellets in a big spread area. I want to be nice and accurate to start with. But when you are starting a session, like I've just said earlier, that noise is a great way of getting fish in your peg. So I can instantly tell that wind's really tricky when you're feeding with a catapult. I wasn't that accurate, and that's where the pole pots are so good because it keeps it all really tight in a little area, and when it is windy like this and gusty, that's so important. When you're picking a float to fish with hard pellets, follow a couple of simple rules. One, if it's really windy and deep, fish a heavier float and a wire stem. That'll keep your hook bait nice and stable. But personally, I like to use a carbon float and as light a rig as possible because it means my hook bait acts as naturally as possible. There's also a couple of other things to consider, and that's to use a nice rugby ball shaped float that sits underneath the surface skim and keeps your hook bait very stable. And use a nice visible hollow plastic bristle that's going to show up them really positive bites. I'll quickly run through the rig that I'm using while I'm waiting for my first indication. Oh, that's an indication. Instant liner. The float just literally lifted up about an inch. The rig I'm using is quite light considering the wind that we've got today. So the depth that I'm fishing in out there is around 5 foot. And I'm fishing with a 0.25 of a gram carbon pinger. And the reason why I like to fish light as possible is because it makes my hook bait act as naturally as possible. So I don't want to fish a really heavy, say 0.75 of a gram or a gram float out there, because these carp are really clever. They get caught loads of times, they get fished for nearly every day. I want my hook bait to act as natural as possible. So the loose feed that I'm feeding, the pole pot or the catapult, I want my hook bait to look as natural as possible, like that instant bite. That was what I'm looking for. Get in. That's something worth bearing in mind as well. The bites that you strike at, you want to strike at those really positive whack unders. Don't strike at the little movements on your float. Like, that's just liners, and if you strike at those, all you're gonna do is end up foul looking fish, and that's a recipe for disaster. So make sure you strike at those really positive, fast bites, and that means that the fish has sucked in your hook bait and shot your float straight under. And it's important at this stage, you'll notice I haven't got my pole up in the air. Keep your pole nice and low. You're almost like leading a dog in now. It's almost, you don't want to be yanking up, because all you're going to be doing is putting loads of strain on your tackle. And while I'm playing this fish now, it feels a good one, to be honest. You'll see the elastic I'm using, it's grey hydro. It's a nice balance, to be honest. It's not too heavy, but again, it's not really light that these carp will, shoot out into the middle of the lake and I won't have any control of them. But a nice grey hydro coupled with a nice side puller, you can land pretty much any size fish. And when I am fishing for proper carp with pellets, that grey hydro is a great elastic choice. Let's have a look at her, see what size fish we're looking at. This is the first fish I've caught at Kiveton for ages. Looks a nice mirror by the looks of it. Oh yeah, go on. Oh yes. Woohoo! It's a good way to kick off the session. A nice carp. That just shows the power of pellets. I've literally fed about, I don't know how long the filming been going, like 2-3 minutes, and it can lead to, that's like £7 fish. That's a lovely carp. They just absolutely love pellets. Come here, that's a lovely fish. Absolutely nailed in the top lip. Wow. And I'll run through the hook and line and the rig and that in terms of the shotting in a second, but let's have a little look at her. Beautiful fish to kick off the session. Nice mirror. Very lively. Come here. Stunner. I'll not lift her up too high because she's still quite energetic. Great way to kick off the day. Lovely. Oh, come here. Pop her back now. Oh. That just goes to show how effective fishing with literally 20 pellets can be. And while we're on the subject of tackle, 6-inch hook length or 15 N-gauge hook length. I've got a 16 Super LWG hook on there, little micro bait band. Make sure you fish your bait bands really tight to your hook, as in the shank of your hook. I've found if your band is too far away from the bend of your hook, you miss a lot of bites, so keep it nice and tight to that band. Rig wise, I've literally got number 10 micro shot on my rig. I've got a number 10 right next to a loop-to-loop connection, and I've got a little bulk about a foot away from that one, so I've almost got a bulk and one dropper. Really simple rig, but I don't like my bulk too close to where my loop-to-loop is, and I literally like to have that one dropper, keep my hook bait nice and stable. The main line is 019 N-gauge, nice and durable. That gives me an opportunity to use 017 or even 019 hook lengths, just in case the fishing was brilliant and if I'm fishing for massive carp. So I'm literally going to put another 6mm pellet on the band. It's fishery feed pellets here at Kiveton. So I would like to use coppens, to be honest, whenever I'm fishing hard pellets on the bottom, but I'm not sure what these ones are. I'm pretty sure they're screttings or something like that, but the fishery feed pellets, which, to be honest, most fisheries you go to nowadays are fishery feed pellets. So I'm just going to repeat the process. The hooks that I like to use when I'm fishing with hard pellets, I keep very simple. I use SLWGs or Super MWGs. If I'm fishing for smaller carp, say 5 to 10 pound, SLWG is my hook choice, but if I'm fishing for those real big fish and I want that utmost confidence in my hook, a Super NWG will not let you down for those big carp. Because I have had a bite so quickly into the session, I'm not going to loose feed now. I'm going to give it like say a minute or two and just fish in those pellets that I've fed in the pole pot. If I don't get a bite in the next sort of 2 minutes, I'll then loose feed some pellets with a catapult. Because if I don't get a bite straight away from those pellets hitting the surface of the water with a pole pot, that'll then make me think, well, no fish have come into those pellets yet. So I'll have to pick up my catapult, and while the wind's as it is right now, you can be nice and accurate. But if it's windy, blowing right to left or anything like that, just stick that pole pot on, it'll keep you nice and accurate, which is one of the most important parts of this style of fishing. As you can see from my pole float there, it's nice and pimpled right down. I've probably got like say a centimetre of pole float showing. That's what you want. You don't want too long a bristle sticking out because you want to see those fast little sharp jags on your float. And if you've got too much bristle sticking out, you can't see everything that's going on your float. So I've had an indication there. I'm going to lift my float up about a foot and let it drop in nice and slowly, almost mimicking those pellets falling in. And you'll be amazed how many fish you get on the drop. Like within a couple of seconds of lifting that rig out, you can pull the elastic out, to be honest, sometimes. That's why fishing with that light rig can be brilliant. But I'm instantly thinking now, I might have to feed a few pellets, because loose feeding a few pellets definitely drew that carp in last time. I'm going to loose feed a few 6mm, I'm feeling positive. Try and be as accurate as you can. Got a nice little light catapult on. I've actually set my catapult to the tightest setting. These catapults are really good because you can adjust what elastic like strain that you want. And I found the tightest setting best for pellets. That were a carp, yes. Really sharp whack unders, that's what you're after. They definitely seem to be reacting to the noise of the pellets being fired in. Yeah, pinging pellets. It's an unreal way of, especially if you're match fishing, great way of starting your session. As you can see how you can get off to a really good start. And if you couple this with, say, catching fish down the edge or short, it's an absolute match winning tactic, this is. Most of the time, when you are fishing the long pole like this, I'll only ever really use pellets, especially in like the spring, summer, autumn months, because you just really single out those bigger fish like this. They absolutely love pellets. Oh, go on the carp. Oh, that's another cracker. Oh, he's bigger than the last one. Oh, he's knocking 10 pound, he is. 9 pound, I think. A little bit less than 10. Stunning carp. Stunning Kiveton mirror. Cracking second fish of the day. Bigger than the first, to be fair. And as you can see, been fishing around 5-10 minutes and I've got the best part of around 15 pound of fish. All on around 30 or 40 pellets, and stunning way of catching these big carp. And how I'm going to target the next chuck, I think I'm just going to fish 6mm, like I said. These size of fish, they definitely they love bigger pellets, and the bigger pellet that you use, quite often the bigger carp that you can catch. So we'll change to 6mm and we'll see how the next chuck goes. The size of pellet you need to take with you when you're doing this style of fishing are 4, 6 and a few 8mm pellets. If I'm fishing for, say, fish from 5 to 10 pound, 4 and 6 will cover it, but if you're fishing for those really big fish, 8mm are my go-to. And I'll always try and use a copping pellet where I can. I think they're a little bit more uniform in size, they don't break down as quick, and I think they make a little bit more noise when they enter the water, which I think is massive for carp. So, I'm going to change up the feed in the pot. I'm just going to feed 6mm instead of 4mm, and I think that's going to definitely improve, if you can improve. To be honest, it's been absolutely brilliant. As 2 first chucks go, that's great, but I think the bigger pellet will definitely catch me bigger stamp fish and keep those big fish feeding for longer. Remember, dunk your pole pot, ship out nice and steady now. And the noise aspect that I think that 6mm will give me is, they'll love that noise. That little bit louder noise and the bigger pellet. You can even see them dropping in there. They make a louder noise and they make a bigger splash. That's what I want. So I'm just going to lay my rig perfectly in those pellets. Fishing with that light rig. Trust me, don't underestimate how light a rig you can get away with. Even when it's windy and blowy, you almost want your hook bait to act as a little bit of a plummet almost. I've found fishing with lighter floats miles better for big carp when you're fishing with hard pellets. So the wind's off my back slightly, which is very handy. If it is in your face, don't try and feed with your catapult too much. Just be a little bit more aggressive. We're a bit wrong striking there then, to be honest. I struck, but I don't think I should have done. That's an indicator to me that I'm going to put that down, because I've had an indication. If I loose feed pellets over the top of that now, I think it's just going to draw those carp up. And when you catapult baiting, it can be a nightmare for bringing fish up into the water. It can be brilliant for getting fish in your peg, but that liner then tells me that the carp there's a fish in and around the pellets that I've fed in the pole pot. I don't need to pick that catapult up right now. But I feel like setting little traps with a pole pot is probably going to be better today. But combining that with loose feeding a few pellets, it's a deadly way of catching these carp. That's a liner there. Pull my float under a little bit. So I know there's a carp in and around the area. Sit there nice and patient now. And you'll see from the shot that you're looking at right now probably, that bristle on that carbon pinger is so visible. It's nice, it's about 1.5mm hollow bristle. I can see it really, really clearly, and I can see all the indications on my float. Don't try and fish with too thin a bristle float, because you're just going to be striking at liners. You're not going to have total confidence that you've had a proper positive bite. And you don't have to get carried away with, look at the size of fish that you're catching. You don't need to catch 50 carp within the first 2 hours. You only need a few bites to kick off your session, and it can lead to a brilliant, brilliant start. So you don't want to go too gun-ho with bait and get too many fish in your peg, and you end up foul hooking them all the time. So I haven't had an indication there for yet. So I'm just going to loose feed a few pellets around my float. There, that. Whack. That's what you're after. And that actually combined with just catapulting in bait. But I don't think that didn't create that bite. I think it'd have gone anyway, to be honest. But having that little bit of patience early on, don't go get carried away with feed. As you can see, I'm going to catch 3 fish, and I've fed less than 100 pellets. So it just shows you don't have to go nuts with it. Looks another carp. I don't think it's as big as the last 2. Well, I'm not too sure. It's waking up a bit now. It's waking up a little bit now, so I'll drop my pole. Take your time with them now as well. Like, you've got your side puller. If it's pulling out if it's pulling like mad, just let go of the elastic. And if you have to put your pole back on and ship back out, do it. But I don't have to right now. Feels like a decent carp. Not quite as big as the last 2, I don't think. I'm going to reckon this one's about a 5-pound mirror. Little scrappy one. Keep your pole nice and low, like right now. Nice and low, and then when you feel like you can see your float, and now lift up, and that'll bring the fish up in the water, and I'll get it. Lovely carp again. Not quite as big as the other 2. Around 4 or 5 pound, I'm saying that one is. On certain days you can start a new swim. So say for example, if I've had 4 or 5 carp fishing where I'm fishing now at the end of this section in line with that pallet, I've got a couple of options. I can either go to the end of my dolly butt, so I can go at the back edge of where I've fed bait, which is okay for catching a couple of fish, but to be honest, I'd have somewhere else in my peg, in my mind, where I can start priming up. So if I think I've exhausted this swim straight in front of me now, I can either carry on pinging bait and carry on, like, you know, flogging a dead horse potentially, which not often, it doesn't really work, they don't really come back to it. Another option is do the exact same line, so plumb up at, say, to my right. So if I'm fishing at, say, 10 o'clock there, in my head I've got another platform which is at 2 o'clock. That's where I'll start to just repeat the process of how I started my session. So I won't be afraid of moving lines, because I don't just want to sit here and not catch anything. And sometimes they will back off and they'll just create a new little area of your peg. It'll be a great way of nicking an odd fish again. But if I'm honest, this isn't a tactic that I'd look to fish from start to finish. I'd look to fish this tactic within the first 2 hours of my session, or if my match, I'd have it in my head that I'm going to ping pellets for the first 2 hours and then potentially look to catch a few fish short, because fish naturally come in as the day goes on. The length of hook length I use, keep 2 simple rules. If I'm fishing in 3 foot or below, I'll use a 4-inch hook length. Anything above 3 foot, it's 6-inch for me for carp. So that line's gone a little bit funny now. I hadn't had a fish there or an indication for a while. And at the start of my session, well, before I started fishing, to be honest, I plumbed up from around 16 metres out into the main body of the lake all the way to where I'm fishing, which is around 14, and I found a nice flat spot. What that means is I can literally fish from, say, 16 metres to 14 metres and it'd be the same depth. So what I'm going to do now is go a little bit past where I've been fishing. Those carp might just be sat a little bit back. It's not a red hot day, they're not crawling up the bank, it's quite tricky fishing as such. So they're clever fish as well, so fishing at the back edge might just get me a couple of bites, and can be the difference sometimes between winning a match, losing a match, or having a great day on a pleasure session. So I'm going to fill my pole pot up again, around 20-30 6mm pellets. Dunk my pole pot under the water. To check everything's okay. Yeah, everything's sound. And I'm literally going to go about a metre past where I've just been starting the session. And you can be amazed sometimes how much it can just trigger a couple of bites. So if you see my dolly butt here, I'm literally going to go just to the edge of my dolly butt. That's where I was fishing before. It's the exact same depth, because I plumbed up at the start, and I know it is. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to rattle in those 6mm just at the back edge of where all the other bait was. And it's just a nice fresh area sometimes. It's almost like starting a new line, but in the same sort of area. And if this doesn't go under now, if I don't get a little run of fish here, I'll then think about moving spots. But just going past where you started can be a good way of almost following the fish out. Ooh, that were in proper bite, that. Little sharp jag. There might be carp just sitting at the back edge. So I'm going to lay that rig in again. I'm not going to loose feed just yet. I'm almost going to hold off loose feed until the last resort. Because I think if I start loose feeding too much bait everywhere in my peg, it's just going to bring the fish up. So that's where I like to just focus them down with that pole pot. So if I don't get a proper positive bite now within the next sort of, like, say 30 seconds, there we go, perfect. If I didn't get that bite, I would have then loose fed, but I'm almost trying to hold off loose feeding and keep it almost like a little ace up my sleeve, if you can, because I don't want to do it all the time. I want to use it as a bit of an impact. It just shows going that, what's that? It's probably less than a metre, to be honest. less than a metre can result in another bite. It's about where I upped it. That's the beauty of that light elastic, balanced tackle, that hook. I've got loads of confidence in that SLWG hook. The beauty is you can use that hook for, say, F1s, all the way up to big carp like this. It's such a like all-round hook that's very rarely lets me down. So I feel like I'm getting a little bit more control of it now. But when the fish are this size, don't rush it. Don't like try and horse them in as quick as you can. Looks a really nice carp, that. Cracker. Look at that. Oh. Oh, beauty. Another beautiful Kiveton mirror. I reckon it's biggest one yet, boys. Well, that couldn't have worked out any better, to be honest. Shows how going a little bit past your bait can be so effective for getting an odd bite off a big one like this. I could have literally been sat the original place where I plumbed up and thought, oh, I'll wait, I'll be nice and patient. But just keeping that up your sleeve, going a little bit past your bait, setting a new little trap, works a treat for a beautiful carp like this one. More often than not, I will match the hatch in terms of hook bait. I'll use the same colour hook bait that I'm feeding with. But there has been a few occasions where a standout red hook bait can be a killer, especially when the fish are feeding nice and confidently and they want to focus in on a different colour hook bait. Coming straight to that bait. Yes. Tell you what, they are stacked up. Literally that far past where I've been fishing. It's incredible. Just shows how effective it can be, just going at the back edge of your bait. And don't get me wrong, you've got loads of options. This is just a little dolly butt, but you could go. That's why it's important to just start at, like, say, 14 metres rather than 16 metres, because if you start at 16 metres, you haven't really got any more options to go past. So I could go all the way to 16 metres if I wanted to, but that little dolly butt seems to be, and that distance seems to be working a treat. That's 2 bites in about 5 minutes of fishing. And as I said, you're almost flogging a dead horse sometimes if you just keep fishing at the same line, and expecting to catch in one spot all day. That these fish are too clever, and they've seen it all before. You almost have to try and keep one step ahead. I can't stress enough how important it is to just strike at those proper positive bites, because last thing you want to be doing is playing fish all day but actually not putting anything in your net. If you strike at all these, loads of liners, you've seen how many liners you get. You get so many liners. Pellets are brilliant for bringing fish in your peg, but when you've got too many fish in your peg and your float's going in and around everywhere, popping up, moving side to side, if you strike at those bites, well, they're not bites, liners, you'll just spend all day losing fish, which is not the one. Let's have a little look at it. Nice and low. Oh, that's biggest of the day, that. Whoa, that is a beauty. Wow. Double figures easily. Yeah, massive. Absolutely stunning fish. Well, like I said at the start, how easy fishing for carp can be, and hopefully in this video I've shown that. Hard pellets, not complicated, you don't need lots of bait to catch fish like this. Absolute stunner.